I am Jessica Miller, a park ranger at Yellowstone Preserve, Montana. I live alone in a small cabin facing the vast wilderness by myself. No one is by my side. Just me, the wild animals, and perhaps the solitude in every step I take. Every morning, I wake up to the silence, listening to the sound of the forest wind rustling through the treetops. It feels like I am a part of this forest, but at times it also makes me feel strangely lonely. Although I know this is the job I chose, I can't help but feel the emptiness clinging to me. Jessica, how's it going? The voice of Marcus, a fellow ranger, came through the radio, breaking the morning stillness. I'm fine, just getting ready to head out for patrol, I replied, trying to hide my sense of loneliness. Watch out for the mother bear, Marcus reminded me, as if too familiar with the dangers of this area. There's been some reported activity of a protective mother bear in the eastern region. Thanks, I got it, I responded, though I couldn't suppress the unease rising in my chest. Mother bears are one of the animals every ranger must be cautious of. When protecting their cubs, they will do anything to keep them safe. It's one of the truths everyone in this field knows well. Wearing my familiar patrol gear, I stepped out of the cabin and felt the chill of the morning air. The animal tracks scattered across the ground reminded me that I wasn't the only one living in this forest. But today, there was something different. A lingering unease seemed to envelop the space around me. I checked my rescue equipment and began walking into the forest. As I moved, I tried not to think about the stories my colleagues had told about bears. They all repeatedly emphasized the dangers of mother bears, the ferocity they could show when they felt their cubs were threatened. It felt like those stories haunted me with every step. Although I was well acquainted with patrolling this forest, today felt different. Perhaps it was because I noticed bear tracks near the cabin yesterday, tracks from a mother bear. I could sense their presence in the air. Anything unusual? Marcus's voice came through again, this time sounding more serious. Nothing, just tracks from a mother bear, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. I'll keep checking. Just a few minutes later, I reached the eastern marsh area, where reports from colleagues indicated signs of bear activity. Dark clouds lingered in the sky, as if they, too, sensed the tension in the air. I looked around, seeing only the treetops and the damp smell of the forest floor. But as I took another step, I heard a faint cry, a sound of desperation. What's that? I asked myself, stopping in my tracks to listen. The cry came again, clearer this time. A cry for help, likely from a bear cub. There was no doubt anymore. It was the cry of a bear cub. Confusion and worry washed over me, but I couldn't just ignore it. I quickly moved toward the sound, my mind racing with what might happen next. The cries echoed, one after another, as if the cub was pleading for my help. As I moved closer to the eastern marsh area, the cries of the bear cub grew louder, pulling me step by step toward it. But in my mind, it wasn't just the pitiful sound of the helpless creature. Another thought began to dominate. Its mother could return at any moment, and that could bring a deadly danger. I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady myself. My heart was filled with conflicting emotions, as if I was standing at the crossroads of a life and death decision. Should I help the cub or turn back to protect myself from a potential threat? This decision wouldn't just affect me. It would determine the fate of a small, vulnerable life. I quickly turned on my radio, my voice trembling slightly as I said, "Marcus, I've found the cub. It's stuck in the mud. I'm going to rescue it. But if anything happens, I need you to be ready to assist me." "Jessica, don't do it," Marcus immediately protested, his voice filled with concern. "You know a mother bear will do anything to protect her cub." "Wait a bit. We'll send more people to help." "No, Marcus, I can't let it die. It doesn't have much time left." I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act immediately. I couldn't leave the crying cub to its fate. I sighed, looking ahead at the cub trapped in the mud. Part of me wanted to give up, turn back and report to the station. But the other part pushed me to act. I knew I couldn't walk away. "Marcus, I'm moving forward. I'll report back later," I said and turned off the radio. I needed to focus entirely on what was happening in front of me. With every step I took, I felt the looming danger around me. The mud clung tightly to my boots, making each step heavier than the last. Using a long stick, I probed the ground carefully, assessing the situation. If I wasn't cautious, I could get stuck in the mud myself, leaving the cub to die without anyone to save it. Suddenly, the cub's cries grew fainter, as though it was losing strength. I couldn't let that happen. "Hang on. I'm going to save you," I muttered to myself as I forced my way closer. My head was filled with worries, but I couldn't stop now. As I got closer, the cub came into view. It was small and struggling desperately, but every movement caused it to sink deeper into the mud. The muffled cries of the cub made it hard for me to breathe, and my heart felt like it stopped at the despair in its voice. What should I do? The mother bear could return at any moment, and if I wasn't careful, she might attack me right then and there. But if I didn't help the cub, it would die. "No, I can't let it die," I whispered, pulling the rescue rope from my backpack. My feelings were a mix of determination and dread, as though I was fighting not just the mud, but also the imminent danger of the mother bear. Things completely beyond my control. I tied the rescue rope securely to a large tree branch and began carefully approaching the cub. Each step had to be gentle, avoiding any disturbance to the mud or loud noises. The cub's eyes looked at me with a heartbreaking expression, as if pleading for help. Sweat soaked my back as I took another step forward. The mud beneath my feet seemed firmer, but I knew one wrong move could trap me as well. Even though I was close, I couldn't afford to drop my guard. I could feel every breath, every heartbeat tightening in my chest, as if something was about to happen. Then, a sudden sound echoed from deep in the forest. I froze, my heart pounding, and a chilling sensation swept over me. The mother bear. Now I wasn't just facing the cub. The mother bear was coming closer. I took one more step, but the chilling sensation returned, stronger than before. The faint cries of the bear cub continued, but they were becoming weaker, as though its strength was fading fast. I had to act quickly. I couldn't let it die like this. The mud around me grew deeper, and the air seemed heavier. The closer I got, the greater the risk, and the pressure burned within me. I looked down at the cub. There wasn't much time left. It was sinking further, its front legs curled up, eyes closed, as if it was too exhausted to keep fighting. I knew I had only one chance to save it. If I didn't act now, it would be swallowed by the mud. "Hold on," I whispered to myself, gripping the rescue rope tightly. Kneeling down, I slowly extended my hand toward the cub, careful not to disturb the fragile surface of the mud. Every move was slow and deliberate. I couldn't afford to make things worse. Though weak, the cub's eyes glimmered with a faint hope. How could I abandon it? "Almost there," I murmured softly, carefully sliding my arm around the cub's small body. The mud was thick and heavy, but I used all my strength to pull the little creature free, inch by inch. A cold wind blew past, sending a shiver through me. Startled, I turned around, sensing something was off. A heavy, thunderous sound echoed behind me, not the wind, but the weighty steps of something large. My heart raced, and I froze in place. Then I saw it, the looming shadow behind me. "Not now," I whispered under my breath, catching sight of the mother bear standing in the distance. Her dark eyes glinted, locking onto me with an intensity that made the world around me seem to go silent. The only sound was her breathing, deep and steady. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything but remain perfectly still. The mother bear stood tall, rising on her hind legs. Her powerful frame, covered in thick fur, radiated both strength and menace. Her eyes were a mix of fury and worry, and I knew that one wrong move could provoke her. I held my breath, trying to stay as unthreatening as possible. In that moment, I wasn't a park ranger. I was just a fragile human standing before one of nature's most formidable creatures. I focused on her eyes, and something strange happened. She didn't charge. Though her body was tense, she simply stood there, watching me intently as if assessing the situation. The air between us was thick with tension, a palpable sense of threat hanging over every second. I still didn't dare make a single move. I couldn't abandon the cub, but I also couldn't be certain I'd survive if the mother bear decided to attack. Yet, after what felt like an eternity, the mother bear stopped moving. She lowered her head slightly, almost as if inspecting her cub. I held my breath, completely still. "Help me, please," I whispered in my mind, though I couldn't form the words aloud. In this strange moment, I wasn't sure if she understood. It seemed as though she did, because after a while, she slowly stepped back, not attacking, not growling, just a deliberate, cautious retreat. The mother bear didn't leave. She remained there, watching, but she showed no signs of charging at me. This peculiar stillness between us left me unsure of the situation. One thing, however, was clear. She was protecting her cub. Her stance wasn't one of aggression, but of unwavering vigilance. My heart was still pounding, but I began to sense something about her intentions. She wasn't just guarding her cub. She seemed to understand that I wasn't a threat, that I was trying to help. I resumed pulling the cub from the mud, every movement slow and careful, acutely aware of the enormous pressure bearing down on me. The presence of the mother bear no longer terrified me as before. Instead, it compelled me to act with even greater caution. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to free the cub from the mud. The mother bear stood motionless, silently watching me with her piercing gaze. Her strange patience left me stunned. Holding the frail cub in my arms, I could feel the profound weight of the moment. Despite the inherent danger in our interaction, it was also an act of trust. The mother bear didn't attack. She was simply waiting for me to do what needed to be done. I sat down, barely daring to breathe, my palms slick with sweat as I gazed at the bear cub lying limp in my arms. Each breath felt heavier, each second stretching into eternity. The mud still clung to my legs, pulling me further down. Though I had rescued the cub from immediate danger, I couldn't let my guard down. The mother bear stood a short distance away, her eyes fixed on me as if waiting for something. "Just a little more," I whispered to the cub, knowing it couldn't understand me. Its tiny body trembled, but there was still strength in its eyes, the eyes of a small but resilient creature. I knew I had to act quickly. If the mother bear came closer, I wouldn't have time to escape. Both of us could end up trapped in the mud, and the mother wouldn't hesitate to attack if I lingered near her cub. Scanning my surroundings, I noticed small branches scattered nearby. I needed to do something, to find a way out of this area before the mother bear decided to act. Pulling the cub closer to my chest, I gently slid my hands under its belly and stood, carefully maintaining my balance. "Let's go, just a little further," I murmured to myself and began taking cautious steps forward. But as I moved, a sudden sound from behind made me freeze. A low growl, not from the cub, but from the mother bear. I turned and saw her moving closer, her steps deliberate and powerful, each one making the ground seem to tremble beneath her weight. My heart raced faster. "Please don't come any closer," I whispered, holding the cub tighter. "I'm just trying to help." Her steps grew louder, her growl more pronounced, and the tension in the air became palpable. I stood frozen, knowing that one wrong move could spell disaster. The mother bear stopped a few paces away, her gaze locked on me, unyielding, protective, and impossible to predict. "What now?" I muttered under my breath, my eyes fixed on hers. I didn't dare move, remaining as silent and still as possible, hoping not to provoke her. Each second felt like an eternity, the proximity of the mother bear overwhelming. It was as if one misstep, one unintended movement, could push her to attack. Suddenly, the mother bear stopped. She stood still for a moment, looking at me and her cub. There was no sound, only the steady rhythm of her breathing. I noticed although she appeared dangerous, she was carefully observing and assessing the situation. Perhaps she didn't see me as an outright threat, but was still keeping her guard up. "Help me," I whispered in my heart, not daring to say it out loud. It wasn't fear of the mother bear that kept me silent. It was the worry that she might misunderstand. Just when I thought she might charge at any moment, the mother bear suddenly turned away, taking a few steps back. That single act felt as though the weight of the world had just lifted off my shoulders. I didn't understand why, but at least for now I could breathe a little easier. She didn't leave, but no longer seemed intent on attacking. I realized she was still protecting her cub while calculating whether I was truly a threat. She kept her distance, watching my every move, but it seemed she had decided to give me a chance. I couldn't waste this opportunity. Even though she didn't attack, I knew full well that I had to act quickly before the situation turned. I resumed moving, one careful step at a time, heading toward safety. The mother bear stayed where she was, her eyes fixed on me and her cub. The tension in the air remained, but I knew she understood. She wasn't attacking, but she wasn't leaving either. And as for me, I couldn't afford to stop now. As I continued to move, Taking slow, deliberate steps to avoid making the mother bear feel threatened, her gaze never left me. The sensation of being watched by such a massive, powerful creature was unsettling. Yet she didn't charge or show any overt aggression. She just stood there, observing. Each passing second felt like an eternity, and every step I took felt like a test of my resolve. The cub remained motionless in my arms. It no longer cried as before, but it was alive, still breathing. Though I couldn't see its face, I could feel its faint breaths against me. A cold wind brushed past, sending shivers through me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the mother bear sense hesitation. I couldn't let her think I was harming her cub. Just a little further, I whispered to myself, clutching the cub tightly and doing my best to keep it calm. Then I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The mother bear suddenly stood taller, her body appearing even larger in the dim morning light. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat quickening. This was the moment where she could decide everything. One wrong move, one ill-judged action, and she might attack. But I couldn't stop now. I had to save the cub. Suddenly, a low growl emanated from the mother bear. It wasn't the ferocious roar I had feared, but a softer, warning growl, as if she was cautioning me. I understood clearly that she wasn't pleased with my proximity to her cub, but it didn't necessarily mean she would attack right away. I noticed her moving closer, but instead of charging, she circled around me, as if assessing the situation from every angle. It was unsettling, but at the same time, her restraint gave me a glimmer of hope. A part of me was terrified, but another part felt a faint sense of relief that I hadn't been attacked yet. It gave me a small boost of courage. She probably won't do anything, I murmured to myself, though I couldn't be certain. The mother bear could change her mind in an instant. Every step she took heightened the tension, her imposing presence a constant reminder of the delicate balance of the moment. I continued moving, step by cautious step, not out of fear, but because I knew that if the mother bear felt threatened, she wouldn't hesitate to attack. I couldn't let that happen. And then, the strangest thing occurred. Instead of advancing toward me as I had expected, the mother bear stopped and fixed her gaze on the cub in my arms. Her eyes were filled with concern and care. I couldn't explain it, but there was a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She no longer seemed poised to attack or brimming with hostility. Instead, she looked at me as if she understood that I was saving her cub. "Thank you," I whispered silently, too afraid to speak aloud in case she misunderstood. But deep down, I knew she had realized that I wasn't a threat. I was simply trying to help her cub. With each step I took, I felt the distance between us growing. The mother bear didn't move closer. Instead, she held back, watching me with eyes that no longer burned with anger, but were instead focused on her cub with an almost tender concern. A strange emotion swelled within me, a deep respect and a newfound understanding of nature, of the fierce and selfless love wild animals have for their young. "Thank you," I murmured again, a quiet, heartfelt gratitude that words could never fully express. When I finally placed the cub gently onto the ground, the mother bear didn't rush forward to reclaim it. Instead, she held back, observing from a short distance, as if ensuring her cub was safe before acting. It was a moment I would never forget, a powerful reminder that even in situations where connection seems impossible, nature has a way of opening a path, creating a moment of understanding and trust. As the bear cub lay safely under the soft morning light, the mother bear remained standing, her eyes fixed on me. She didn't seem in a hurry, only stood there quietly, as if waiting for something. I slowly backed away, keeping my gaze on her and avoiding any sudden movements. My heart was still pounding, but the intense anxiety from earlier was beginning to fade. It seemed as though the mother bear had accepted me, though I couldn't understand how she possessed such patience and calm. "I think we're okay now," I whispered to myself, though I could still feel the lingering tension in the air. The mother bear continued to watch me, as if evaluating my every step. Her eyes no longer burned with anger, but I knew she remained vigilant, ready to protect her cub from any potential threat. After a moment, the mother bear lowered her head and slowly stepped toward the cub. I watched her movements closely, and for the first time, I saw a tenderness in her actions. She wasn't rushing, nor was she aggressive. Instead, she carefully approached her cub, gently lifting it up and licking the mud off its fur. The sight left me in awe. I had never imagined that a wild animal could display such gentleness, especially after facing what she must have perceived as a great threat. "Thank you," I murmured softly, barely above a whisper, not wanting to disturb the moment. But I felt that she understood. Her eyes met mine, and I could sense a shift in her gaze. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to acknowledgement. She seemed to recognize that I had helped her cub. I took a few more steps back, careful not to move too abruptly. The mother bear kept her eyes on me, but the hostility was gone. Instead, her gaze felt more like that of a cautious guardian, watching, but no longer perceiving me as a threat. "I'm not your enemy," I whispered, hoping that somehow she could sense my intentions, that all I wanted was to do the right thing. At that moment, I realized I couldn't stay here forever. The mother bear had done her part, and now I needed to leave so she and her cub could recover without further disturbance. I turned and began to walk away. Once again, the mother bear didn't stop me. She simply watched, making no move to charge or pose a threat. This gave me a sense of relief. I glanced back at the mother bear and her cub one last time. In that fleeting moment, I understood that, despite the vast differences between our species, nature allows for moments of connection and mutual understanding. The mother bear lowered her head again, and I couldn't help but think it was an unspoken gesture of gratitude, even though she didn't utter a sound. "Get well soon," I whispered to the cub as I looked at it, now calmer and safe. The mother bear met my eyes one last time before quietly turning away with her cub, retreating from the area as if nothing had happened. As I left the marsh, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It felt as though I had just overcome a monumental challenge. At the same time, I knew I had learned something profound. Sometimes, trust and patience can transcend what we believe to be impossible. And while bears are wild animals, I had felt a sense of understanding and compassion from nature itself. On the way back to the cabin, I kept replaying the strange encounter in my mind. A human and a wild animal had shared a moment, a silent bond of trust that I would never forget.